and start with a introduction of just the overview of psoriatic arthritis and where we are. And I went to a session the second day, I think it was, of the, all kind of runs together, the second day of the conference. And it was called the Evolving Pathobiology of Axial Spondyloarthritis and Psoriatic Arthritis. So I'm just going to focus on a couple of the bullet points from that specifically because I think it's a good introduction to going into the clinical trials of the treatments that we're going to talk about next. So one of the things that they talked about in here, and I thought evolving was the key word, because I know going to these conferences a few years ago, it was, there still was not very many therapies for psoriatic arthritis. And even today, when you think of it compared to rheumatoid arthritis, you know, it's still a little lacking. And we have a challenge no matter which disease it is in finding the right one that works with the right patient at the right time. That is why our organization is so focused into precision medicine and really this deep dive research into what's working for this group, this subgroup, and this atypical patient, and this. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit more here in detail as well. But we have been seeing an emergence or an evolving of treatments in studies in psoriatic arthritis. And I would even venture out to say it's one of the hotter disease focuses in addition to lupus, whereas a couple years ago was all about non-radiographic axSpA. And that's where I was like, wow, I'm like a kid in a candy store. Everything was about what I have. But it's saying that it's good news for psoriatic arthritis. There's a lot of studies going on here. And they talked about the unmet needs for psoriatic arthritis and new strategies. So one of the studies that we'll mention here in a little bit is about biomarkers and discovering biomarkers, novel inflammatory pathways, different cells and different paths in our body that are targeted that can inhibit different things, which would then react and lessen symptoms, but they react differently in different people because we're different. That's a very layman way of saying it, but we don't try to overload you with science. That's kind of the basic concept here of these. So there's a lot of different targets that we're working on, and also in clinical domains. And what that means is if you think about your disease and you think about all the different parts of it. So you can have pain, and you can even go into a joint pain or whatever that pain is, fatigue, so comorbidities, so maybe uveitis. So those would be domains. So there's a lot of talk about targeted therapy around domains and also combination therapies. So, hey, if we know that only like 40 to 60% on average of people are going to be successful on these treatments once they get into the market, now there's more talk about, well, what if we combine this with that? Maybe we're onto something there. So that is sort of kind of how the started for my journey on learning all of the research. I did want to also mention there was some draft guidance that I believe it was EULAR, this last EULAR 2021, with GRAPPA, the oh my gosh, I don't have it spelled out. It's so bad. It's.
Let me look it up while you're talking.
Oh, that's terrible. I always call them GRAPPA.
Yeah, I do too. So I'll
like
find
you are. I don't ever remember I don't necessarily, because I always say the acronym.
GRAPPA came up as a alcoholic beverage.
I was just gonna say, I got that same thing. It's like, that is not what I'm looking for, but thank you, Google.
Yes.
No.
I'm looking it up.
I know it's group, and it's psoriatic or psoriasis.
Group for research and
there you go.
Group for research and assessment of psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis.
Yep,
okay. So I had half of it right. Okay. So
that's why there's three of us, Tiff. That's why there's three.
I know. Gosh. Okay. And so essentially there haven't been updated recommendations for treatments for about 5 years or so. So they did start to upgrade, update those draft recommendations. And essentially not a lot changed except for we keep seeing this over and over, shared decision making. And that there was a position statement that was added to this about the decision that you need to consider the personalized needs of the patient. And that's something that our organization has been strongly focused on for the last several years. We do a lot of work in shared decision making. So that, and also mentioned some combination therapies. And so we just wanted to, again, show you sort of how this evolves. You need to have recommendations or guidance to understand the best way to treat. And then we add in the shared decision making, because think about, you're at the office with your physician and you're deciding which therapies. So that's all happening. But before we even get to that, the research has to happen, right? So now we're going to dive backwards from your experience, your moment in the doctor's office, and take you back to how in the heck did these treatments even get to be an option in the first place. So, so we are going to jump in. The first study that we're going to talk about, and every so often you're going to hear me stop and sort of reiterate what we're doing here, because we are turning this larger debrief into segments. So myself, Tiffany, then Deb and Katie, all persons living with rheumatic diseases, as patient-led debriefs. We are reviewing from the American College of Rheumatology ACR 2021. We're going to jump in and give an overview of the psoriatic arthritis treatment it's called the keepsake trial. And this is for, now I'm not going to even attempt to butcher the treatment scientific name. I couldn't if I tried. Yeah. But Skyrizi is the brand name. So and again, just as patients, because this is patient led, that's why we use the brand name so we're not promoting, we're not trying to, it's not like a branded ad or anything for these diseases. It's just, that's how we as patients know these treatments. So that's the way that we need to understand them. It is an IL-23 inhibitor, which again just means it's one of those targets. It's targeting something specific in our bodies that will inhibit this, so that hopefully we have less symptoms, less fatigue, and so forth. They divided this into 2 different phases, and in this they had one that were patients that were did not do well on DMARD, so disease modifying agents like a methotrexate, for example. So they were considered not doing so well, but they had not yet advanced to a biologic. And then the second arm, that's what we call them. We have the different groups, the different samples, so different arm. They were people who had also failed a DMARD and 1 or 2 biologics. So, and that could be that it just had an inadequate response, or it could be they were intolerant. For whatever reason, the side effects were too much, or the mechanism of action, they didn't do well with it. So, excuse me. So in this case, they were enrolled, and I did find this interesting. So I have a couple slides that I'm going to share with you as well, because we thought we would take this opportunity to sort of explain how this works. But I always like to look into the background when I see these studies to find out who they are. And something I found really, really kind of intriguing was the average age of the trial participants were in their 50s, and they had an average of 7.5 years since onset. And that just kind of caught me off guard, because they had only been treated with DMARDs or DMARDs and 1 or 2 biologics. So for me, that just said, I don't know, what do you all think? That just seemed like a long time.
I agree with you. And as I was digging into the study, just over 1,400 patients were, enrolled. That's, and it's, with the similar demographics of baseline disease, that's odd. I feel like I'd want to be more aggressive and look for more a better therapy that's going to, unless there aren't that many choices, that
I think that was think that was sort of the point that they were saying. And I don't know when this, you got to also remember, this is a phase 3 trial, which means it's been going on for a while, and that's why there's 1,400. You start with a trial at phase 1, little, then you get bigger, a couple hundred, then you get to 1,000 plus. So chances are this has been going on for quite a few years. So, but when I look, but that was why I brought it up, because when I look at it now and I look at those inclusion criteria, I'm like, wow, that seems like, why did they not have more? But that's probably why. And it shows you how therapies are advancing for these diseases. So I'm going to also take a moment to show a couple slides here. So I have a note to myself, inclusion criteria slide. Here it is. Share my screen. Oh, well, let me move it over before I share my screen. I don't know what's on my screen.
Exactly. Better find that out first, right?
Good tip. Always know what you're.
There you go. So let me make this a little bigger.
Study design treatments, is that the one?
Yep, that's it. So the reason that I'm pointing this out is one of those learning moments for how research works. So inclusion criteria, why is this important? Well, as people living with these diseases, if you decide that it's right for you to be in a clinical trial for, let's just say, for treatments, they're going to have a predetermined list of inclusion criteria or things that you must meet in order to be included in that trial. And the reason they need to do this is so when there's enough proof, there's enough data from a similar group to correctly analyze the information and show it is truly effective, it is truly safe. That complicates things when we're all so unique. And you're going to see as trials change and we move more towards precision medicine, there's going to be smaller pools of people because the inclusion criteria may not be so broad. It may be more fine-tuned. And that's sort of in the process too of what we're looking at when we look at these inclusion criteria. Okay, this worked for X amount of people with these things happening. So then we can do more trials. All right, well, what happens for these other people? So if we look at the inclusion criteria, the things that I wanted to point out, greater than 5 swollen joints and greater than 5 equal to or greater than 5 swollen joints and 5 tender joints. Presence of equal or greater than 1 erosion on a radiograph.
Interesting.
And so that right there is a person living with non-radiographic expo, which means there's no radiographic damage on my radiographic evidence. It's those types of things where that really creates a subset of who is being studied. A lot of people would automatically not qualify, right?
Yeah, I'm also looking at one of the other qualifications. It talked about a BMI of 31 and a mean BMI of 31. So what about the really skinny people and the really little overweight folks and stuff? I mean, my goodness, that's interesting. That jumps out at me specifically as well. But just even what you have up here, but that just seems very, specific.
Well, there was another, it wasn't this one. It was this one. Okay. So the other thing these are demographics that it was broken out to, and when they were testing, I should say for that radiographic damage, it was only in the arm of those who had the one failed DMARD, not in the ones with the biologic. So again, I would like to learn more personally about where that, what that measurement is. Why do I care? Why do we care as an organization? Because we are trying to work our way again towards matching the right treatment to the right patient at the right time. So understanding the choice of why the radiographic damage needed to be on the people not on biologics, it's got to be an important component.
Right.
And so I am very interested in knowing why. And I did notate that the lead author on the research paper is somebody that I know. So I am going to reach out, which is always good. So I will reach out with that question. But, I wanted, again, just to show these baseline demographics and disease characteristics. So the PBO on the right is placebo. So that means when you go into a trial, you often will be, there's a blinded side and you don't know. So you could be either given the drug or you're given a placebo. So it's still being administered or taken as a pill or whatever. You just don't know if you've actually taken the drug or you haven't taken it. And then they test all. And so that's how they know if it's working or not, because there's an effect. And if it's higher in the treatment arm, then they can show the safety and efficacy of it. So I wanted to point out on this one, just the different things that they're measuring. I specifically wanted to show patients the fatigue score. This is not novel. This is not unique to this study, but because we have the information here, we wanted to take the opportunity for patients who say, well, these treatments only target the arthritis or the joints. Maybe that was the original target or the original reason for what they were testing back in the day. Yeah. But now they do test for fatigue levels. If that is increased, they do these different domains, these different areas that are of importance to patients. And they also, you can see how they also, they test on the responses if people have had more than 3, so this tells them information like if a person is refractory, it's difficult to treat. How are they responding? Are they still responding as high as somebody who has only had or has had 1 biologic, has 2 biologics? You can see the numbers going down, which tells you something. These are people who might be more refractory. So again, this is just a learning moment. This is just us giving you more information on how research works is kind of an opportunity to do that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Katie, you haven't said a word, so I'm going to turn it over to you to say something.
I'm taking it all in. This isn't my area of expertise, so I'm just kind of learning and trying to understand it. And it is really interesting as far as how, I know, in my mind, how research into one of these areas can help research into all of these areas. But how does that work? How does that, those roots grow and spread and work their way to other parts? So.
Right. Deb, anything to add?
I just also find it very interesting, which again is why you pointed out what you did. But the inclusion criteria, the exclusion criteria, all of that goes into every single study out there, and just how much of a difference in whether you qualify or not, and why you don't qualify, and all of those things. So it's just very interesting as well.
Again, I feel like I wouldn't qualify definitely for that study, but maybe not for most studies, seeing all the specifics that they get into.
Right.
Which doesn't mean you shouldn't try if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps. It definitely helps research along and for them to find out more information about all of our diseases. And this is one that, in history hasn't had a lot. And I'm just really glad to see that there's some actually happening. And even with lupus has actually had some pretty big breakthroughs recently in the past year. So again, same type of thing. Love the information and love the research keeps building.
Yep. and I was going to give a little lesson, and I have show a slide, but I didn't save a slide. So I was also going to mention, and I'll just say it, I've said it before, but this is a good snippet also for us to crop and just be able to share. But one of the things that these trials measure, and that you should always look at when you're looking at the research, is it's called the ACR 20, 50, 70, and they measure that. And I thought I saved a slide for you to show you next on the how this changed or how this evolved, and darn it, I didn't. So essentially what happens is they compare the placebo, the people who actually didn't take the medication, compared to the people who did take the medication. And when you see that, or you hear it, you may have heard it before, your doctor may have said it in the office, like an ACR 20. What does that mean? It means 20% improvement. That's what it means. So it is, and ACR stands for American College of Rheumatology. Yeah. So these are the standards. So when they first started testing biologics way back in, the 1990s, they were always trying to achieve ACR 20. And I remember doing a presentation in like 2010 to some pharmaceutical companies, and I was like, I don't give a damn about your ACR 20, because I just thought it was so silly. Okay, 20% improvement, big deal. I mean, I know it's a big deal, sort of, but
let's shoot for the stars.
But yeah, it's like 20. So now you start seeing it going. The trials will be aiming towards the Hub 20, the Hub 50, the Hub 70. Some even I've seen in 90. But one of the things that I thought that I wanted to tell you all about was that, because that's how they are able to say if something has strong efficacy, if it's working. And so that's why you always see that when you're looking at trials. There's also different measurements. You'll see ASAS, which is about spondyloarthritis specific. There's other ones that we might mention, but basically this one in particular is measuring the overall improvement levels. So long story short, with this particular trial, the efficacy did prove that it was statistically higher than those in placebo. Always a good result, well tolerated, and no new safety issues detected from what you would normally expect from a biologic.